Well, hello again, guys. This is Christian Massar speaking again and wishing you all a happy new year 2013. So 2012 has been quite a year, both for me personally and also around the world. A lot of the developments in the Middle East, of course, with Syria, and that conflict been going on for about a year and a half, and a lot of that was happening this previous year, of course, and most recently, in around December, definitely saw some things happening in Egypt too, with Mohamed Morsi trying to pass the new sweeping powers to protect the revolution, and of course all the protests and everything with that. And and also here in Canada, there's been a lot of political drama too, but the budget 2012 was passed that they couldn't pass last year because of, or last year being 2011, because of the government lost the opposition's confidence because of that, and but they were able to pass it this year with a majority. So definitely a lot of drama around that, and also throughout the year. So let's begin with this week in history. And this week, unfortunately, it's not this week, but it's a bit late, so I'm sorry about that. But we're looking at the week of December 23rd to the 29th. And sorry, it looks like there's a little bit of skipping in my video there, so the laptop is being a little iffy today. So anyway, let's get right down to business here. So December 23rd, 1916, this year, or 2012, it was a Sunday. So this was an event in World War I, the Battle of Magdaba, kind of a lesser-known front of World War I. There was, of course, everybody knows about the European front, of course, but in France and stuff. But also, the Middle Eastern front was actually fairly active as well. Of course, there was Gallipoli, but the Gallipoli campaign, I believe that started in 1915 or 15, I think. But of course, that's not really Middle East; it's more Turkey. But still, it's but the Middle East, of course. This was taking place in the Sinai Peninsula. This Battle of Magdaba here. So just to give a little background to that, on January 26th, 1915, the Ottoman Empire, who were allied with the Central Powers like Austria-Hungary and Germany, they invaded the Sinai Peninsula in Egypt, and this was part of the Egyptian Sultanate, which was a British protectorate. So obviously they invaded pretty much British territory, or British allies anyway. So British forces were fighting, and they were on the defensive until early 1916. Then they pushed off to Romani. Then after winning that battle, the British pushed further, and then Battle of Magdaba was a consequence of that. And the Ottomans, actually, the Germans were there too. So the Ottoman-German force had set up strong positions around Magdaba. So there were lots of trenches, and they were fairly entrenched in very, very good defensive position. Basically, not quite. Excuse me. Anyway, that's getting the text there. So anyway, so the British and New Zealanders and Australians, they launched their attack, and the Allies actually used mounted infantry, kind of like in the old days where infantrymen or cavalrymen would ride in on horses, and then they could get off dragoons. And so kind of a similar concept, but then they would mount on their horses, and then they'd ride as close as they could to the Turkish lines and get off. And then they'd engage in close quarter combat. And of course, artillery and machine guns supported these troops, and aircraft recon was exposing the camouflaged Turkish German positions there. So finally, at around 4:30 p.m. on December 23rd, 1916, the Turks surrendered. And Butcher's Bill, 22 British troops killed, while 300 or more killed on the Turkish side. So it was a landslide British victory. And then the Battle of Rafah was fought a few weeks later, and major aerial bombardments happened between both sides, like a lot of the German bombers attacking British aerodromes and railroad and pipeline construction. And that was actually kind of a big factor in this the Sinai campaign, where, or at least around the Battle of Magdeba, anyway, where Brits were trying to build the railroad, and so the Germans were trying to halt those efforts there. And then, so finally, the Sinai campaign ended on February 18th, 1917, when surrounded Ottoman troops surrendered at Al-Hassana without resistance. So after that point, then the British were starting to go up to attack Palestine, which was Ottoman-held territory. Then, interestingly, about a year and a half later, the Ottoman Empire ceased to exist after the end of World War I. So this was kind of the Ottoman Empire's last little stands there. So yeah, and so let's move on to the next day, December 24th, 1943. So General Dwight D. Eisenhower becomes the Supreme Allied Commander during World War II. And Eisenhower, or Ike as he was also known, graduated from West Point in 1915. And this group was later to be called the class the stars fell on, because 58 members of that class out of 164 would become at least one-star generals. So there were a lot of high officers in that class. Eisenhower got his fourth-star generalship in 1943 when he became Supreme Allied Commander. On Christmas Eve, he became one of 4 American generals to have the 5-star rank of General of the Army. And Edgar Puryear, who wrote the book 19 Stars, he said there were many different factors that why Eisenhower was chosen for this position, and then eventually being in charge of the invasion of Europe, of Nazi Europe and everything. Well, he had ideas and imagination, and that's the thing that a general needs to have. They need. It's kind of like how Julian Corbett said, military theory can guide and be a good template, so to speak, but it's not the be all and end all of military strategy. In the end, experience and imagination and good thinking needs to win the day in the end. Military theory, although important, it can't be followed 100% all the time, because there will be circumstances that will be very different from the other battle. So Eisenhower definitely had that imagination that generals and commanders need. And also, as the Supreme Commander, he kept the Allies unified. Between the Brits and the American forces together, he kept them together. General Omar Bradley, he said these words: Eisenhower could work with British and Americans and keep them both fairly happy. If Ike had not had that faculty, we might have been fighting each other more often than we were. And so the British and Americans had different procedures, different tactics, different decision-makings, different traditions, different psyches, different soldiers' wages even. So there was a lot of differences, and even though they were allied against the Germans, and in Japanese as well, though that was mostly an American fight, they were very different from each other in many ways. And so, but Eisenhower was able to work these things. There was one story where one general was upset with something the British had done, or some kind of a decision that was made, or something that was said, and then Eisenhower said, keep it cool. Don't get your dander up. So it's so that's Eisenhower was basically perfect for the job at that point. And also there were cliques as well, or potential for cliques, and but Ike kept that to a minimum as well, so that helped. The third thing that Eisenhower brought to the table was he brought a strong sense of optimism. He wasn't defeatist. He had a strong sense that everything would work out, and that's in life. That's always important. But also, when you're winning a war, you need to be able to be confident that you can win. Why is it that morale is so important to troops? And so, psychology is everything. Well, not everything, but very huge part of it. And so these qualities were among the most important factors leading to the Western Allies' victory in Europe, and of course the D-Day invasions and Operation Overlord. And so after the war, of course, Eisenhower won the 1952 presidential election in the States, riding on the slogan, "I like Ike." So it's kind of corny, but kind of works. But he played a role in the civil rights movement, actually, kind of the beginning things of it. And he told the District of Columbia to end school segregation, and he wanted to see the District of Columbia as kind of a model for the rest of the country. And he proposed the Civil Rights Acts of 1957 and 60, and in the end, that helped pave the road to the end of racial segregation. And it didn't. They weren't as influential as some of the later legislations, but it kind of got it started. And also, what's very interesting, there were political benefits as well as humanitarian benefits to launching these initiatives and so on, because around the world, communism, Russia and all those other communist countries, were looking at the states and said, "Aha! There's racial segregation there. There's racism. It's rampant. It's part of their system." So they were using the Americans' racism as propaganda against the West, or at least against the Americans. So I don't know, were there political motivations behind Eisenhower's movements in the civil rights? Definitely, there might have been an influence for sure, but definitely, even more importantly, it was humanitarian efforts and so on. So definitely being a good general, he also made smart moves as the president when it came to civil rights. So let's move on here. So December 25th, year 800 AD. So in addition to December 25th being Christmas for the last about 2,000 years, but in December 25th, 800, Charlemagne, or Charles the Great, or King of the Franks, he is coronated Holy Roman Empire, or Holy Roman Emperor in Rome. And he's given... I need to turn that thing off. Excuse me. There we go. So Charlemagne was given the lands or the remnants of the old Western Empire, which had fallen about 4 centuries before. So his new empire eventually grew into the Holy Roman Empire, which is very interesting because the Holy Roman Empire, or HRE, was not Roman, really. It kind of grew out of the remnants of the old Western Empire, but really there wasn't a whole... It didn't control Rome, and although the HRE did have territory in Italy over the years, but also the HRE was basically in Germany, Austria, modern Germany, Austria. That's where it was centered, and it was a collection of little states underneath and electorates and stuff like that. So, and the emperor was actually elected, which is very interesting, very different from mostly hereditary monarchs in the other empires and countries. But and also, if we want to use the word holy to kind of show a buddy-buddy relationship with Rome, as in the Roman Catholic Church, it certainly wasn't holy in that respect. There was the HRE was embroiled in the investiture controversy, which was kind of a big political church-state issue in the Middle Ages about basically who had control of the appointment of bishops. Of course, the monarchs are saying, "Oh, I want to appoint my bishops," while the church is like, "Oh, these are my people. I need to be able to appoint them." So, and the church had even claimed papal power was the sole universal power, and only he had the power to depose an emperor. So the church is really starting to get its fingers into the affairs of state. And so the controversy was finally resolved in 1122 by the Concordat of Worms, and this Concordat allowed secular leaders to have some, but really insignificant decision-making in religious appointments. And so the HRE was embroiled in that, and then of course during the 30 Years' War, that's where the war was mostly fought. It was started in Prague, of course, and then kind of spread throughout Germany, and rest of Europe got involved, or most of Europe. England didn't get involved so much in it. But finally, the HRE was dissolved in 1806, actually by Napoleon, because after Napoleon beat Holy Roman Empire in various battles, Francis II, who was the last HRE or last Holy Roman Emperor, he abdicated, and so the empire was reorganized into Napoleon's ally, the Confederation of the Rhine. So about 1,000-year history for the HRE there. So it's very interesting. I find it one of the most interesting aspects of medieval times, because so much happened in the Holy Roman Empire, and also it was also very interesting that, again, it was certainly not a democracy. Like, there weren't people voting, like the regular people or peasants voting for an emperor, but there were electors that I believe it was 7 that actually voted for one. And so let's move on here. So December 26th, 1776. This is during the American Revolution. And so here, Hessian or German mercenaries in the service of Britain are defeated at the Battle of Trenton. And on Christmas Day, one of General George Washington's aides wrote this. He thought that the Americans would have an easy battle with the German mercenaries because, in his words, they make a great deal of Christmas in Germany, and no doubt the Hessians will drink beer and have a dance tonight. They will be sleepy tomorrow morning. So, indeed, there was much merrymaking and Oktoberfesting in Trenton that December, that Christmas night. So, the Americans under George Washington, they on the 26th, they entered Trenton from 2 ends. And the Germans were still hungover from their Christmas celebrations. And the Hessians eventually tried to fight back, but the Americans had blocked any route of escape, and then they also did their work with artillery and shooting from buildings and everything like that. And the Hessians soon surrendered after their commander was actually killed. So there's a lesson in that. You'll always be on the watch. There's this guy. He's kind of a gun person in the States. His name is James Yeager. Your responsibility to be ready for the fight never ends. So yeah, you can party, but kind of do it wisely. Yeah. So these Hessians certainly didn't do it wisely, and the hell is all they lost. So it's actually, it kind of reminds me of the situation in Battle of Gaugamela, where the Persian king Darius, he was terrified of a night attack by Alexander the Great. And so he kept his troops up all night on September 30th, 331 BC. And so they were so tired the next day on October 1st, then the Battle of Gaugamela actually happened. Alexander did not attack at night. Well, back in the ancient days, night attacks were actually very dangerous to pull off. They were so hard because there was little communication, there was no night vision equipment, there was no, like we do nowadays, and so it was very, very difficult back then. So Alexander knew better, and so yeah, and then but except this time, the Persian soldiers were not. There was no schnapps and cards, but at least his men were awake doing their duty. But no, they still lost. Perhaps of their fatigue the next day. Imagine staying up. Having done night shift. With a relatively easy job on night shift, and it still really messes up with your sleep patterns, and you still feel pretty tired and everything like that. And but imagine having to fight a battle right after that. See, at least I have the fortune of coming home at about 7 in the morning, and I can sleep. But yeah, having to fight a battle. And so let's move on to December 27th. So we're coming closer to the end here. So December 27th, 1922. The Japanese carrier Hosho, which means Phoenix in flight, is commissioned. And so it was actually the world's first aircraft carrier. And as such, it was used as an aircraft carrier for testing and training. So this is where aircraft carrier tactics would be tested and try it out and everything like that. Pilots could train. And it first saw action in the Chinese theater of war, both in the Shanghai incident in 1932 and in the opening stages of the Sino-Japanese War in 1937, which many will debate that is when World War II actually started, not in 1939. But the Hosho participated in and survived the Battle of Midway against the Americans, so it fared much better than the 4 aircraft carriers that were sunk on that day. But after that, the Hosho was returned to Japanese home waters to continue training. But when the war ended, she was used as a repatriation vessel, moving 40,000 soldiers and civilians that were abroad throughout the old, had been deployed or moved or whatever during the war. And now that the war was over, they were bringing them back. It was 9 trips. So finally, she was scrapped in 1946. So anyway, so there's the first aircraft carrier, the Hosho, the Fosho. So here we go. December 28th. This time, 1943. So as a Canadian, this kind of fits. So Canadian troops win the Battle of Ortona in Italy. So the Canadians were suffering many casualties in World War II's Italian front. Thus, December 1943 became known as Bloody November. That month claimed about almost 1,400 Canadian troops in the Italian theater. And so the German-held town of Ortona was behind the Winter Line, which was in reality a bunch of defensive lines across Italy. And so the British penetrated the Gustav Line, which was considered the main line of fortifications. And then the 1st Canadian Infantry took the right flank and pushed towards Ortona, which was a port city. It was thought that there was a lot of cold and rain, and this is December, and so it was pretty nasty going there. But it was thought that Ortona would be an easy victory. Excuse me. Just under a year earlier, the Germans suffered a great defeat at Stalingrad. So General Montgomery thought that the Germans would want to avoid urban warfare as much as possible. So it was probably even thought that they would want to abandon the city or fight for a little bit, and then that would be about it. But even though it had the town had a strategically important deep water port, it was thought that Germans probably wouldn't want to stay for very long, simply because of the fighting urban combat. And it was also believed that Ortona supply lines would be cut, so then they would lose heart and lose supplies. But the Germans did not leave. In fact, the 1st Parachute Division, the Fallschirmjäger, they held the town and they set up defensive emplacements throughout it. And they destroyed buildings to create rubble, and so rubble making it harder for tanks to go on the streets. Underground passageways allowed German defenders to move from place to place, so they had a way to get around all that rubble they created. And so they set up all those good things and, well, bad things, and set up mines and time bombs and everything like that. And so on December 20th, everything started going down. And despite our heavy artillery barrages, Canadians were taking a lot of damage and a lot of casualties from snipers. And so to prevent these losses, the Canadians did mouse holing. What they would do is they would use demolitions or pickaxes or whatever, and they made holes in buildings, and then they kind of went within buildings and kind of got cover from the snipers. And so, but charges and tripwires were also in the buildings and the debris, so that made it dangerous. And so, but finally, after about a week, the battle was finally won on December 28th, when the German paratroopers withdrew. And Ortona has been called Little Stalingrad because of the mouse holing and brutal urban fighting which characterized Stalingrad. And this battle even shows something that can be learned. This battle shows that even soldiers cut off from reinforcement and supply can still make a defensive position and still hold it really, really well. We see cases like Iwo Jima and Thermopylae as well. Similarly, like a lot of outnumbered troops, no hope of reinforcement, or maybe probably even no hope of escape. but certainly Iwo Jima was a case like that. But they still kept the Americans at bay, and still in Ortona, the Canadians won, but it was but they were still, getting hit a lot by the Germans and everything. The Germans fought hard for sure. So it also tells us not to be overconfident that a battle will be won so easily. Everybody kind of thought the Germans would be like, yeah, they'll get out, they'll leave, they won't be interested in having another Stalingrad here. But it turned out that they did stay, and although they didn't stay to the last man like at Iwo Jima or Thermopylae, or the Spartans at Thermopylae, it was, they still stayed enough to cause some damage. So, okay, and then second to last day, I believe. Oh, actually, you know what? I made a real blunder here because I have only December 28th. So, I'll tell you what, we'll skip the 29th for today, and we'll skip class early. So, anyway, December 28th, 1908. Helmut Gollwitzer, a famous German theologian, is born, and that's on December 28th, 1908. So Helmut studied Protestant theology and wrote on Martin Luther and John Calvin's understanding of the Eucharist. And during World War II, he served as a medic on the Eastern Front, but the Soviets captured him, and he became a prisoner of war from 1945 to 1949. But kind of more significant is, kind of going back to religion, like earlier last week I posted a video about religion and radical orthodoxy and everything. So this is kind of religious history as well. Helmut Gollwitzer was a member of the Confessing Church. The Confessing Church was during World War II. It was a German religious body that opposed Nazi attempts to control church life and doctrine. And the Nazis tried to de-Judaize, so to speak, Christian theology. They focused less and less on the Old Testament, and they even took it out, making renaming the New Testament Die Botschaft Gottes. Sorry if my German is really terrible there, but that means the message of God. So instead of New Testament, it was the message of God. Now, they took away a lot of the influence on Judaism and how Old Testament theology ties in very closely to New Testament theology. And the Confessing Church, which beside Gollwitzer also included Dietrich Bonhoeffer and Martin Niemöller, they saw Nazi religious control as incompatible with Christianity, as God is the one with sovereign authority over a Christian life. And members of the Confessing Church suffered Nazi persecution for speaking out against, of course, the atrocities and Nazi ideals and Nazi religious control. And what's very interesting too is Hitler tried to take control of church life, as kind of mentioned here, but and of course doctrine, but even handpicking Lutheran bishops that believed that Jesus was not Jewish but Aryan. So it was very interesting because it was very we kind of see things like that in the radical extreme right Christian movements today, like Christian Identity. They have similar beliefs that the Jews in the Old Testament, they're not talking about Jews there, they're talking about Nordic people, like Scandinavians, Germans, and things like that. So it kind of a similar idea. So, but the Confessing Church was kind of an underground church that was able to, that stood firm for, Orthodox theology and, or not Orthodox as in Eastern churches, but, common Christian beliefs and everything. And finally, Helmut Gollwitzer died in 1993. And after the war, he's known for being a really staunch critic of capitalism and nuclear weapons and things like that. So anyway, so that's the end. We're missing one day. Sorry, I forgot to write down a event for December 29th. Maybe I'll do that for the next week in history. See if I can do that this Friday, and including this week now, but also have also include the December 29th, because Forgot it this time. So anyway, I'll be doing a little bit of editing and stuff like that. But then I'll probably get this video up tomorrow. We'll see. So it might be a little bit later than now, but yeah. So we will see you all later. And once again, Happy New Year, and you have a good time.